The underwater dream, Julie's California vision and the family's quiet panic. I have carried this particular stretch of one day at a time inside me for more than 4 decades now, the way some people carry a weather report that never quite clears. It is not the jokes I remember first, nor even the precise sequence of who speaks when. What returns unbidden and almost physical is the particular quality of the light in Anne Romano's living room on the night the news of the underwater birth first settles over the family like an unexpected fog. I was a young man when I first saw it, still living in a house where the television was the only reliable source of both comedy and instruction about how adults managed fear. Even then I felt the scene as something more than entertainment. It registered as a kind of emotional barometer, a reading of pressure systems that had nothing to do with California water tanks and everything to do with the quiet terror that arrives when a child announces a plan the parent cannot control. Julie wants the baby born underwater. The phrase itself, spoken so casually by Max, lands with the soft finality of a door closing in another room. You and Julie are planning on having a natural birth. And then the clarification that makes Anne's face, even in my memory of Mackenzie Phillips's determined calm and Bonnie Franklin's carefully managed composure, tighten almost imperceptibly. The baby will enter the world in a tough tank of water, far from Indianapolis, far from the hospital, where Anne herself once labored, far from every medical certainty the generation of women who raised us had been taught to trust. I watch Anne in those first moments, and I am back in my own mother's kitchen the afternoon I told her I was leaving for a city she had never visited, for a life she could not picture. She smiled the same careful smile Anne wears here. She said the right encouraging words. And later, alone, she stood at the sink for a long time, the water running, her hands motionless under the stream. There is a particular American optimism at work in Julie's plan, an early 80s faith in the possibility of redesigning even the most ancient human event. Water birth was still exotic, then still the province of alternative magazines and the occasional California foundation that promised a gentler threshold into existence. Julie has absorbed the literature. She speaks of temperature that approximates the womb, of dim lights, of the absence of shock. She has done the exercises. She has reserved the tank. In her mind, the birth is already a kind of performance of intentional love, a deliberate rejection of the cold plastic rooms and bright lights and strangers she associates with conventional delivery. I recognize that hunger. I once believed with the same fervor that if I only arranged the circumstances of my own life with enough care, right apartment, right job, right carefully chosen silences, I could protect the people I loved from every ordinary sorrow. The body, of course, has other plans. The body is not impressed by literature. What the script does not show, and what I have always supplied in the long intervening years, is the precise angle of Anne's shoulders when Max finishes explaining. She does not raise her voice. She does not in these opening moments even argue. She simply absorbs. That absorption is its own form of violence, the quiet kind mothers practice when they decide the children must not see the full weight of their dread. I have watched my own mother perform the same absorption more times than I can count, when a sibling announced an engagement that felt too sudden, when a friend of the family received a diagnosis, when the evening news delivered another story of a young person whose plans had outrun their preparation. The face remains composed. The voice stays level. Only the hands give anything away, the way they fold and unfold a napkin or rest too carefully on the edge of a table. Max, for his part, is already half defensive, half evangelical. He has been converted. The psychologist, the foundation, the literature, all of it has given him a language for what he wants to give his child: warmth, gentleness, peace, love, especially love. The phrase will return later when the labor has already begun and the California tank is an impossibility, but even here in the first revelation it carries a peculiar charge: love as method, love as environment, love as the one variable they believe they can control. I think of the young couples I knew in those years who spoke the same way about home births, about organic everything, about the possibility of shielding a child from the abrasions of the ordinary world. Some of those children are adults now. Some of them still speak with gratitude about the care that surrounded their arrival. Others more quietly admit that the effort itself became another kind of pressure, another standard against which the inevitable mess of actual life was measured and found wanting. Catherine the grandmother is the first to voice the terror outright. This whole idea absolutely terrifies me. It's so new, it's not thoroughly tested, no medical doctor, no hospital. Her voice carries the particular authority of a woman who has already survived the ordinary risks of mid-century childbirth and who cannot understand why anyone would court additional ones. I hear in her the same inflection my own grandmother used whenever one of us proposed something that violated the known order: hitchhiking, living alone in a city, marrying too quickly. The fear is not abstract, it is cellular. It is the memory of what bodies can do when the carefully arranged plan collapses. Catherine does not need literature. She has the evidence of her own labor, the memory of the nurse who told her to push the remembered instruction to stick it. That memory will surface later in the living room when Julie's first back pain arrives, but even here in the first disclosure, the family tries for a few minutes to contain the conversation. Anne asks that they discuss without shouting. The request itself is a confession. She knows the volume will rise. She knows the old fault lines: Julie as the difficult daughter, Barbara as the sensible one. The perpetual comparison will open again, and they do. The insult about Miss Goody Two Shoes and the dimples on her butt is pure sitcom surface, yet beneath it runs the older current of sibling grievance. The sense that one daughter has always been measured against the other and found either wanting or worse preferred. I have lived inside that particular comparison. I know the way it can turn even a discussion of birth plans into a referendum on who has been the better child, who has caused the mother less worry, who has earned the right to be trusted with something as consequential as bringing a new life into the world. What stays with me long after the jokes about Perrier and the advertising tie-in Francine will later propose is the particular quality of Julie's certainty. She is not arguing from evidence so much as from vision. The California tank is already real to her. The water is already the right temperature. The baby Felicity, if a girl Marlark, if a boy, is already floating toward the light in a medium of pure intentional tenderness. Against that vision, the family's practical objections feel almost vulgar. Hospitals are cold, doctors are strangers. The ordinary American birth is an industrial process from which the emotional meaning has been stripped. Julie wants to restore the meaning. She wants the first sensation, her child experiences, to be warmth rather than the slap of air and fluorescent light. I understand the desire so completely that it still, after all these years, makes my throat tighten. I once believed the same thing about the conditions under which love could safely begin. And yet the body is already preparing its rebuttal. Somewhere in the hours that follow this dinner, Julie will feel the first low ache across her back. The California reservation will become irrelevant. The tank will remain empty. The baby will arrive not in water but in the crowded, imperfect, fiercely loving air of Anne's Indianapolis apartment. That future is already present in the room even as the family argues about the plan. I feel it the way one feels a change in barometric pressure before the storm arrives. The dream of the perfect birth is already colliding with the stubborn fact of timing, of geography, of the body's refusal to wait for the ideal setting. I return to this opening sequence whenever I need to remember how carefully we construct the conditions we believe will protect the people we love and how little those constructions ultimately matter. Julie's underwater vision is not foolish. It is the logical extension of a generation that had begun to question every institutional arrangement surrounding birth, marriage, work, and family. It is the same impulse that sent so many of us in those years toward communes and natural foods and carefully written birth plans. Some of that questioning was necessary. Some of it was a form of magical thinking, a belief that if we only arranged the water and the light and the guest list with enough precision we could keep suffering at bay. The series in its quiet way refuses the magic. It lets the body interrupt. It lets the family, with all its history of blame and preference and half-swallowed fear, become the actual environment into which the child arrives. Anne's face in those first moments remains for me the true center of the scene. She does not yet know that the labor will begin in her own home. She does not yet know that the bathtub will be considered and rejected, that Schneider will appear with lanterns left over from a samurai night at the lodge, that the baby will be named Annie after her. All she knows is that her daughter has chosen a path that places the child beyond the reach of ordinary medical certainty and that she, the mother, Must find a way to live with the knowledge without letting the knowledge destroy the evening. The restraint she practices is a form of love so severe it borders on self-erasure. I have watched women I love practice the same restraint. I have practiced a version of it myself. It is the price of remaining the adult in the room when the children begin to make decisions that could in the worst case cost them everything. The underwater dream is beautiful. It is also already impossible. The family does not yet know how completely the body will overrule the plan. They only know that the plan has been spoken aloud and that the speaking has changed the air in the room. I sit with that changed air even now. I feel the particular weight of a mother's fear, that cannot be voiced without becoming an accusation. I feel the particular buoyancy of a daughter's conviction that love properly arranged can rewrite the oldest human script. Between those two forces, the episode and the long stretch of family life that follows will have to find its way. The water is still only an idea. The real medium into which the child will arrive is already gathering around the table: the unfinished dessert, the half-swallowed arguments, the history of who has been trusted and who has been doubted, the stubborn ordinary, irreplaceable presence of the people who will still be there when the ideal setting vanishes and only the imperfect love remains.